Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. My name is Kyler Cheatham. I am the Global Marketing Director here at Third Stage Consulting Group, and we are having our Fun Friday live stream where we talk about our Meet the Consultants series. So, a lot of this is meant to be interactive. So, I definitely encourage you to go ahead and put any questions or your own experience within the industry in the chat box wherever you're watching. We are live on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube right now, so we can see all of your chats and questions. So, first of all, welcome to my guest, Mitch Audison. He is one of our most talented and popular consultants here at Third Stage. So, I'm excited to have some time with him because that is a valuable resource for him to join us today. So, thank you, Mitch, and welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Yeah, you bet. You bet. So go ahead and pop where you're watching from today in the overall comments. We'd love to know our global audience because we do have a global team here at Third Stage. Mitch is out of our North American office, but we do have 3 other international offices, one in Europe, a new office that we just opened recently in Cape Town, South Africa, and then also in our Asia Pacific area. So we truly do have a global team. So, Mitch, can you tell us a little bit about your role here at Third Stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined the third stage team in July of 2020, which was a crazy time to be in the consulting space as a senior consultant. And really, I just right in and joined so many cool and fun projects. And I was promoted to being a manager after spending a little bit over a year and 3 months with the firm. So enjoying life in my new role.
Absolutely. So, do you have a specific specialty that you work on here at Third Stage, or what do some of your client services look like?
Sure. I find I've been fortunate to work on a wide variety of projects, quite a bit of range. I don't really have much of a specialty. They consider me to be a jack of all trades. So, implementation, selection projects, selection, implementation projects, some HCM, some MES, some MRP, even some custom applications and browser based. They called it a hub for their sales team. So I've done a little bit of everything in my time here at Third Stage, and that's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about just how you got into consulting throughout your career path? Did you go to school for technology, or what does that look like as far as your experience in the career?
Yeah, great question. I always tell anyone who's willing to listen, I can't believe that I ended up where I am based on what I studied. Uh, I studied finance and economics just because it's a good way to get my foot in the business. And I landed a job with a Fortune 500 company and as a financial analyst. And I found myself working with IT time and time again. And it just so happened that projects, I became like the liaison from my operations team. And the IT team said, "Hey, why don't you come do the same thing, but work for us?" And so I got to work and became an internal consultant at that company, working with all the different departments within the company. And then it just kind of grew and blossomed from there. And so I've done internal consulting, and then I went and I did some external consulting in the network and infrastructure space. And also, and then that landed me here with Third Stage with a ton of enterprise, large scale technology and digital transformations.
Well, that's definitely a journey. I think everyone that Eric and I interview, they can't figure out how they got into the technical space, myself included. So I'd be curious to hear from our audience because it looks like we do have a global audience joining us today from India, Portugal. So thank you for tuning in. If you could let us know what you studied in school or what your specialty was at university, that would be really interesting for us to see, because I think a lot of times, we can branch out. And so I'm curious, Mitch, consulting can seem really broad term. So
Mhm.
when you look at what that means as far as a definition for your clients, how would you best define a consultant?
I would say that the big thing that I do that I bring to the table and I work with my clients is problem solving. It's trying to understand what's your situation, how did you get into this situation, and how can I help you navigate getting out of the situation? Because it's usually you find yourself in a bad or landscape, and there's a better way, and you just don't exactly know how to get there. So it's a lot of problem solving.
Definitely. Definitely there to be. We always joke that our change practitioners, which Mitch does a lot of too, is a therapist to our clients, and just
Yep.
helps them understand the purpose of their overall projects. So when it comes to just your overall career path, where did you go to school? I'm curious about that.
uh, I studied at Colorado State University. I was before they got knocked out of the basketball tournament. Can't believe we were one and done, but such is life.
Yeah, well, at least we got there. And as a fellow CSU grad, we had, if you are watching our YouTube channel, we had Dr. Christina Serrano, who is an IT professor over at Colorado State University. We interviewed her about the psychological aspects of digital transformation and kind of creativity within IT. So I definitely recommend checking that out. I was super biased while we gave our lecture to CSU. As it's my alma mater as well. So though I was sad to see them kicked out of March Madness as well, I was happy that we even made it. So for us, that's a
That's right.
huge accomplishment. So when it came to
Little
kind of
wins.
entering the workforce at a Fortune 500 company, that seems like how a lot of consultants kind of get their feet wet or understand, kind of different industries
Mhm.
or career paths. Is that something that you would say is a I guess I should say a positive choice of being able to have that experience? Or do you think that there's opportunity for younger, maybe more junior employees to go into consulting directly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think about how my career path could have been if I would have chosen something different. Gates. I think that I was fortunate that I found a company that gave me a lot more responsibility than my pay grade. And so while that was tough to go through in the beginning because I felt like I was underpaid, I'm getting paid back on that experience and those experiences. And I would say with the consultants that I've worked with, there is no model or you can get into it from any different background. There's no you do this, then that. It's learn every step along the way, apply those learnings, and you'll continue to do well in consulting. So I don't think there's one background that's better than another. It's just are you willing and able to learn and continue to learn and apply what you've learned?
Absolutely. Being kind of that sponge is what we always talk about with consulting, is just having that overall motivation and that thirst to continue to learn things, whether it's new systems, whether it's new industries, as that's constantly changing for our kind of line of work. And
Yeah.
Abdul has a very cool comment here, and I wondered if I could kind of craft a question out of it. So he said, it's such a relief to hear what Mitch said. Being in SaaS sales, I was planning to get into administration or consulting and was worried about my educational background being in business administration. And Mitch, I'll pose this to you after I kind of give my feedback. I feel like at this point, a lot of times, unless you're going into a certain technical space, the educational background really has very little to do with the actual work that we
Mhm.
execute here at Third Stage. And I'd be interested in your feedback on that, Mitch.
Yeah, that I would completely agree with that. I think I was reading an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal the other day where software companies are looking for teachers because they found that their ability to manage stress, their multitasking, their organizational skill sets translate really nicely into some of the roles that are coming up and being formed in the software space. And I think about that all the time with us at Third Stage. Uh, if you bring the right attitude, effort, and desire to learn to the table, we can use you in so many different ways that you wouldn't even think possible. When I was first interviewing, I was like, here's my skills, here's what I'm really good at. And that was great. It helped me get my foot in the door, but I've done so many different other things as I've learned and grown that I wouldn't have been qualified for before. I've just been given those opportunities because of, coming to the table, willing to learn and willing to tackle problems.
Yeah, and I might add on to that is much of that is about the network, right? When it comes to leveraging your overall educational background or workforce background. A lot of
Mhm.
times we hire within our network, that you might have worked with someone previously here at Third Stage. And really having that access. So I would encourage specifically any students or even graduates out there to really kind of tap into that network, whether it is on LinkedIn and
Yeah.
being like, engaged in that conversation. I think you had some previous colleagues here at Third Stage, right, Mitch?
Yeah, I did. I worked with Adam at that Fortune 500 company, and basically it was, hey, we had the conversation of we have similar values. I know you work hard, and I know you're smart, and that's all I need to work with. And I was fortunate enough to be able to make my way in based on that background.
And I'm curious when it comes to your technical skill set in this
Mhm.
role, what are some of the baselines that you really need to understand? Or if there is someone looking to get in consultant or get it into consulting, what are some of the technical skills and expectations that's needed within your role?
Um, and that varies from client to client and from project to project, but I would say ability to read about what's going on out in the landscape in the technology space, and then being able to tie that back to a client's problems that they're navigating. So I find myself reading a lot of industry articles, just trying to say, here's what's happening in cloud computing, for example. And I haven't run very many cloud projects, but it helps to be able to speak the language and to know what's out there and what else may be going on besides what we're initially engaged on. I think that's huge.
Absolutely. That's kind of what we do with a lot of our content is that we do hot topics, Eric and I, every week in the industry. So if you haven't subscribed to our ground control podcast, you can do that wherever you get your podcast. We have new episodes every Wednesday. And just like Mitch is referencing, the first 15-20 minutes of the episode is just us talking about what's going on in the industry. For example, this next week, we have our prop tech article that's coming out in our research on property management and technology and the real estate market for multifamily housing. And we talk about a bunch of
Mhm.
different things that are involved in there. So I think that's such a great piece of advice, Mitch, is just keeping up on current trends, just mostly so you can have that conversation. And it's a great way to see, like, is this interesting to you? Are you enjoying that type of learning, because that's really, I think, what consulting is constantly learning and growing in your field.
Right. No, that's exactly it. If I think I've learned everything, I will be dished a slice of humble pie. I promise.
So what can you tell us a little bit about your just day in the life as well, like your schedule? Do you work in an office? Do you work remote? And how is that a positive for being a consultant, and how can it be a negative?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm here in my home. This is a bedroom that my wife was nice enough to let me commandeer as an office. My day is crazy. I have two young kids, and so I working remotely. I'm fortunate enough that I get to be with my kids every morning. I get to wake them up, make them breakfast, get them off to daycare, and even be fortunate enough to have my 3.5 month join me on a few conference calls. So it's a little bit of everything. It can be a little stressful at times, not having that separation. When my daughter was born pre-COVID, um, I went to the office still, and so it was early on work, but this flexibility has been huge. My family being able to drop at a minute's notice and go do something, run to the doctor for a sick kiddo, or whatever it is. So day in the life is starts very family focused, and then really dives into rolling up my sleeves with clients. Generally, we'll have any sort of session going on, whether it be workshops where we're learning to understand more about our clients, demos where we have vendors coming in and showcasing how their software can fit the needs of the client based on the outputs of those workshops, vendor negotiations, you name it. I'm all over the place, but it's a lot of conference calls. And then, a lot of time just really digging in and researching and take what's out there and support There's a ton of stuff out there. And that's why they brought us in to help come up with some ideas and help problem solve.
Great. And what does your team dynamic look like? Can you take us through, like, who do you work with here at Third Stage? How is that structured? How do you ensure you still collaborating in a hybrid environment? Those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Third Stage, very much in teams, and that was a huge selling factor for me to come to Third Stage. I've worked in some consulting type situations where you're kind of a one-man island and you're responsible for everything and knowing everything in that, and it's easy to miss something in that structure. So as a team, we're jumping on Teams calls, debriefing after meetings, like, all right, let's talk. Did you hear that the same way? What are our next steps after this? So there's always a director who's kind of your executive sponsor on a project. There's some form of a manager, senior manager, and then there's generally 1 to 2 consultants on each engagement, depending on the size. In group chats together, hitting each other on individual team chats, and it's cool. Actually, I think I've met in person not even a fourth of the Third Stage team, and it's been who I've traveled with. And who I know from a previous life. So I know that there's some folks in Denver who I still have yet to meet. And so that's cool that we are able to form such strong relationships and haven't yet sat down for a face-to-face. Look forward to that, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and I'll add on that too, because my role at Third Stage here is to support our global team. So we've never obviously met a lot of our global consultants in person, but they do still cross collaborate on a variety of different projects. And a lot of times that expertise, if we do have, for example, a client that has chosen a software, chosen a system, and needs implementation support, if we might have someone in Hong Kong that specializes in that, we will cross collaborate on those projects too. So it's a very interesting environment, and I'd be interested to hear from our audience how many people are still in more of a remote. We always have operated in a remote just because of the landscape of our overall projects that we need to cover and our global saturation within the marketplace. But I'd be interested to hear from our audience of who is in a remote environment versus in person. If you could share that with us, that'd be great. So I'm curious to dive into consulting. You are a young parent in that area, and a lot of times consulting can have this stereotype that it's not sustainable for someone that might be in a very transitional season of life, if you will. And a lot of times that's why we hear from our young people or our young graduates that they go to directly to a big three firm, Deloitte or something like that, because it gives them stability and schedules and those types of things. So I wondered if you might kind of dive into what that looks like from your perspective as a parent, and then also at our smaller boutique agency.
Yeah. I would be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge. My wife is a superhero, but at the same time, my travel isn't very extensive. When I first came on board, that was a question I had because I did have my young daughter at the time, and it was about 25% was the expectation, and that's sometimes where that is back to back trips, and you don't travel for 4 months. And so it can vary, but I will say it's really refreshing that we are such a family friendly firm. When I call up my directors and say, "Hey, here's what my wife needs, what my kids need," I don't get brushed off. It's okay. Let's problem solve together. Let's figure out how we can make that work. Um, I made the request that I always take the last flight out of town on the day that we're working. Some days that's been 1 o'clock, and so when you're on site with a customer with a client, that's a 4 hour session, and that's not a whole lot of time. But when we're very candid about what we need and people respect that, there's been a really people are very gracious to help out a young parent is what I've seen. So I'm very happy and fortunate about that.
And would you say, in your experience with some of the other bigger consulting firms, is that a common theme or is that kind of unique to Third Stage? I don't know. I've never worked at one of the big three firms. Only my experience is with Third Stage. So I'm curious.
Yeah. I haven't worked in a big three myself, but in my previous role with another smaller firm, it was very much they tried to be family friendly, but they didn't do it quite as well. So I would say that this is definitely one of the best environments I've worked in from the travel perspective. It's not easy, but we make the best of it, and our work that we do on site is a lot of fun. Really getting to dive into to companies and their operations and what they do and learn from them face to face. So that makes it easier. And knowing that I can get the last flight out of town and be home as quickly as possible has made it possible.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I'll echo that. Both my husband and I work at Third Stage. We have two young kids. We have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I think kind of the same age gap that you have there, Mitch. But it is, it's a family first type of environment. And that's why a lot of times we try and get younger people to come on the consulting side, because we seem to a lot of times reach very specialized workforce and they're very senior in the career. And we kind of have a gap in that middle tier. So that's something that I think we try and fill in or just explain. Because I think, and you tell me your feedback, Mitch, a lot of times that can be a misperception that it's not a career in which middle management families can be involved in.
Yeah, yeah, I had that perception too, and it took knowing someone who was in there and could speak and say, hey, as a friend and as a colleague, that we make it work, and I think you could make it work too. That helped me to make the jump. But now that I have, I would say to anyone out there that is interested or curious, happy to answer any questions about what it looks like. But it does work for us. It works really well. And I think that there is that misperception out there as well, because we can make it work. And actually, I was concerned about stability and coming in at that middle tier without having 25 years of experience, like so many of our senior leaders do. There's a ton of work for someone like me, so I have stayed busier than I ever expected. And that's been huge for me and my family, because I want to make sure that if I'm going to be traveling, it's going to be worth my while.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's really cool about that you just mentioned is the fact that you do have that access to those senior executives that, they've decided to leave a large company CIO role and do some specialized consulting, and you do get to kind of learn from them in that environment that you wouldn't typically have a lot of visibility, or at least in my experience, within kind of a more corporate type of structure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And it blows my mind. This is by far the most talented team that I've ever worked with, from a background and the things that they've done and accomplished. I'd be lying if I said I walked in and didn't have a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm like, wait, you did what? But it's amazing how many people are willing to share what they've learned and Hilton and a better rounded person in the workforce.
So I'm wondering if you could share with us just kind of a sprinkling or some case studies of your client work. What industries have you worked in? What systems have you worked on? Just to give kind of our audience joining us today a more kind of granular view of what you do for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the coolest part about working with Third Stage. I have worked with everything. One of my first client engagements was I worked with a nonprofit, so I got to work on some sales force for nonprofit, which is different than any other Salesforce work that I've done. ERP with Sage ERP. I got to work with SAP, their ERP, CRM, their manufacturing. I got to work. We do work with a lot of manufacturers, so I've worked with folks that do limestone mining and then convert and then do ready mix concrete. I've worked with aerospace and defense companies, so folks that are putting satellites up into space, which was really cool. As Blue Origin was putting their satellites into space, they had some industry dirt that I would never even think to know about or ask about, because it's just another layer of perspective from someone closer to me than me. I've worked with chemical manufacturers. I've worked with a company that they started their business right out of college, making T-shirts, and they grew it into a multi-million dollar business. So I've gotten to work with so many different flavors of businesses, verticals, you name it, and I've done it now, which is so much fun to be able to say.
And can you tell us, a lot of times we are in a niche area here in Third Stage in being both independent and technology agnostic. Can you
Yeah.
explain to us what that means when you are going into a client engagement?
Oh yeah, that's everything to me. It means that I can look my client in the eye and say, I don't care what you pick. I just want what's best for you. And the ability to give that unfiltered, no questions asked guidance makes a huge difference to me, because I've worked in an environment where I say, I want you to pick this one, but secretly, there's something in it for me if you pick the other one. And so being able to come in and say, my only focus is to get you the best thing that you can for your situation, is amazing. I can help them say, hey, this is a better tool than that one, and you're right to like that one more, but your workforce, you guys are too busy to implement SAP. That's a big ERP. Maybe you need to go with something a little bit smaller. So that ability to really right size things and give that advice without fear of repercussion of upsetting a partner or anything like that is amazing.
And so, what is your relationship with software vendors? I think a lot of times we can get this perception that they're not, we don't work closely with them, or they don't like us, or those types of things. Can you just help us understand kind of like what your relationship would be with them?
Yeah, and actually, I again had that misperception that when I learned we're technology agnostic, I was like, oh man, vendors must hate us, and it's actually the exact opposite, because we're so focused and so deliberate and so in tune with what's going on in the industry. When we pick up the phone and call a vendor, they know they've got a qualified lead. They know that they're not wasting their time, and they know that they can put their A team on it and have a good chance of earning some business. So our relationship with vendors is very candid. It's very straightforward, and we say, look, here's how you position yourself to do well. Here's what you need to show. Here's some of the things that that we know that you do well, and that will resonate well with our client because that's exactly what they're looking for. So, I don't say we throw softballs up there for vendors, but we align vendors to showcase their strategic advantages with clients that are looking for that advantage.
That's super interesting and such a great perspective that is kind of behind the scenes, lifts the veil on the overall process, because I think a lot of times that's just really misunderstood within the
Mm-hmm.
industry. We do talk a lot about vendor bias and what that means for our overall approach, and that is still a real issue within the software community.
Yeah.
But I think as we move towards it being more populated and saturated with options, that kind of falls behind. So when we look at things like best of breed solutions versus full ERP suites, what is the best option for the customer is really our biggest objective. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's great in a career position as well, because there is no pressure. The pressure is to choose the best solution, and maybe there's not a good solution
Right.
for a client. Maybe they don't need a new system and they need a process optimization or something like that. We
Yeah.
still advise in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a process. It's, when we're giving presentations to our clients, we have an analysis of options. And one of them that we always say is do nothing. That's an option. And here's what that looks like. Here's what not pursuing a software selection and putting that off looks like. And our clients love that because it's an unbiased third party perspective on, do you think I should move forward with it? And so we give that type of advice all the time. And I've actually got some friends that are, in the technology space, IT managers, IT directors, a few friends that are VPs, and they'll come to me and be like, hey, which software is the best? And my answer back to them is, I don't know, hire me and I'll tell you what's the best fit for you. Because there is no such thing as a best software. It's the best for your circumstances, your situations at this time.
Yeah, I still am trying to get hashtag it depends trending, as that's Eric's answer to literally everything. And I always
It's
push
good.
back on that. But it is truly, it depends, should be seen in the overall perspective. It is what do you need as a
Yeah.
client and a unique organization? What does the DNA of your business need to thrive?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we always poke fun at him about, our audience and I, when it comes to it depends. So if you want to be a consultant, get that tattooed on your arm or something like that. It depends, right? Um, so can you tell us some of the challenges that come with being a consultant, specifically in kind of the client world? I would assume sometimes that can be a really vulnerable position, sitting
Mhm.
in saying, this is all what's broken within your business and
Yeah.
having that conversation. So can you share with us just some challenges and how you might overcome those in those environments?
Yeah. There are a lot of potentially awkward conversations you can have, especially when you need to give feedback back or let someone know, like, hey, this person really needs to not be on the project because they're doing X, Y, Z, or you name it. There's an uncomfortable conversation for that. But it goes back to the idea of us being technology agnostic and us being truly unbiased. When we do that, then we have set forth the intention and the desired goal to do what's best for you.
Mhm.
And so when I say, hey, you need to take this person off the project because they're not doing what they need to do, it goes back to that foundation of, I don't care what happens. My only objective is to do what's right by you, and you brought me in for that perspective. And so having a few of those conversations and keeping that foundation is how I've navigated those, and I've gotten better at it. But it's still uncomfortable, and oftentimes you're talking to a CIO who the technology that you're recommending get replaced was their baby. That was the project that maybe got them promoted to being a CIO because they've been with the company for 10 years, and you have to tell them this is garbage. You need to rip it out. Use a better
Yeah.
wording than that, but those types of situations you have to navigate. And I think if you can go in and say, from our unbiased, objective opinion, here's what we see, people respect and appreciate that a lot more than hearing what they want to hear, because our clients are paying us for our experience and our perspective.
That's excellent. That's a really good piece of it. And I think it's kind of building that muscle within that conversation, right? And I think that goes back to kind of our coaching culture here at Third
Mhm.
Stage, is there's never going to be a situation where you're kind of pushed into have that conversation by yourself, right?
Right.
There's definitely a lot of resources that can help you. Like we said, we have a deep bench of experience that have had that same conversation for over 30 years. So helping us to learn that and helping to exercise that. I know my husband, who, as I mentioned, works for Third Stage, he's excellent at like very awkward conversations. Like, for example, I have a lot of challenges in giving feedback to like our childcare community, because for me that's like the most vulnerable piece, and I don't want them to not like our kids or judge us if we want them to do something different. And he can just go in there and like Jedi mind trick, like sprinkle all of these great pieces of feedback, but get across a very important point. And that's always something I admire about you guys, is you're able to really kind of have that finesse and develop that conversation, because you do want what's best for all parties involved.
Yeah. And building on that, your husband has been instrumental for me to be able to have that conversation and have the confidence, because not only are we coaching our clients, but we're coaching our consultants too. We're going in, and I know that I've got 30 years of experience coaching me up on how this difficult conversation. And so what was a pretty at first is now something that I have that conversation 4 times a day, and
Yeah.
you get better at it. But I needed that coaching, and our team collaborated, and it wasn't a thing. Like, no one looked down on me for not knowing how to handle that situation. It was oh yeah, that is tough. Here's how I would handle it.
Yeah.
It's a very constructive environment, and it's allowed me to grow tremendously.
Well, let's not like make his ego way too big. All right.
Yeah.
He's still get through the door, right, of our house. So,
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll take him
yeah,
down a peg later.
yeah, right, right. But so if we are wrapping up this conversation, I want to just let everyone know that if you are interested in learning more about Third Stage Consulting and our team, we're always growing.
Mhm.
We match culture as opposed to quantity, so we're not going to rush on, a college campus and bill our clients with, a huge army of very junior consultants. Each consultant is really handpicked so that they do match our family culture. They match our, overall innovation, our dedication to the quality of services and the relationships to our clients. And if that sounds like something that you're interested in, I very much encourage you to email us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also head to our website, and we have a careers resource there as well. You can also connect with both Mitch and I via LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I tagged us, if you're on the Third Stage LinkedIn, I tagged both of us on the page. Feel free to reach out to us. We always will put you in touch with our resourcing team. And with all of those logistics out of the way, Mitch, is there anything else that you would give as far as career advice and consulting to our audience?
Yeah, I would leave it with something that we talked about before, and that's we're looking for the right type of people, and a lot of the skill sets, the technical stuff, we can teach along the way. I found that we're looking for the right people, and we'll help to get you there with the exact skill set that you need to be successful. And I was very fortunate that I was one of them that came in with the right attitude, effort, and was able to be molded. So if you're willing to be clay, come work with us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mitch. I know you're
Yeah.
super busy with client projects, but we hope everyone has an excellent weekend or is enjoying their weekend if it's already Saturday where you're watching. But we hope to hear from you. And I do live streams with our team every Friday. So please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can set reminders for my interviews with our teams. We're always taking live questions. We love user engagement. If you haven't been part of that already, we encourage you to post your questions or bring your questions in our comments. We address you, my team and I, directly. So thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next week. Thank you, Mitch.
You bet. Thank you.